This is a mandated government warning to all those currently watching. The following individual is about to have an opinion. Okay, everyone listen, right? Okay? I don't think you're quite ready for this absolutely controversial take I'm about to have. Many of you, I think, will be shocked, some of you may even be appalled, and a few of you may even revile me for years to come. You see, superhero movies are pretty good. By now we're all well aware of the origin story to the modern superhero genre and how it's come to saturate the market of modern cinema. It's been well over 4 decades, you heard me right, 4 decades since the initial rise of the genre following the release of Richard Donner's Superman in 1978. And you'd think after all this time audiences would finally start to be getting bored of seeing larger than life characters pushing the limits of imagination. And yet somehow we don't seem to be getting less of them, we only seem to be getting more. So that leaves me wondering, if you say you're sick of seeing superhero movies, and you say you're sick of seeing superhero movies, and you say you're sick of seeing superhero movies, then who wants to see a superhero movie?
It's me, Austin!
I've watched a lot of superhero movies over the past few years, and while there are some people who think the genre is past its prime and feel it's time to put it in the cinematic retirement home alongside westerns, noir, and expressionism, I personally still think the genre holds a lot of future potential. Ooh boy, that's some strong stuff. It's fair to say that the past few years have definitely swayed wildly with public perception on the way the genre is now viewed. Everyone in the last few years seems to have subconsciously came to the same decision that these films aren't enjoyable all of a sudden. So today I thought I'd break down just what's going on with the superhero genre and why I still think it has yet to reach its full potential. It's no secret that superhero movies don't have the best reputation among movie critics, and I can see where they're coming from. The same hero's journey where they learn they're part of a much bigger world than they previously thought, learning to use their powers for the good of all, and always succeeding in the end with little to no consequences for some of the actions they take. The genre definitely went through and is still somewhat in an extended phase of awkwardness where we got some disappointments. Like a lot of disappointments. Like yikes. There were definitely outliers during this time that stood out, but after everyone slowly recovered from the 10-year culmination that was Endgame, many people began to get bored of the scene very quickly, as if they all suddenly switched their brains onto killjoy mode and became aware that wow, there's been an awful lot of these things. Recently though, it feels like the films being released have finally started to branch out and try new things, and we're moving past the point where they feel the need to adhere to strict character dynamics. Oh, it's another superhero movie, but this guy has unbreakable righteous morals, and this guy's more practical in his morality, and this guy... Instead, more often I think we're seeing actually interesting concepts that get explored in more depth, like the people making these films are starting to realise that, maybe our audiences want more than just the same story being retold, but with a different coat of paint on it. No Way Home took its initial premise as another Spider-Man movie and then flipped everything on its head by introducing the multiverse as a tangible thing that exists, where Peter has to come to terms with the fact his naive actions have and will lead to people getting hurt, as well as suffering the consequences of that. The Boys said every superhero is now a narcissistic arsehole. Take someone full of self-importance who believes themselves literally untouchable before knocking them down to the level of everyone else. What impact would this have not only on their public perception, but on their psyche as a whole? Invincible starts its first episode out seeming like any other Saturday morning TV show, before it breaks down its own tropes into a new twist on the genre, that as you watch, you can't help but feel worse and worse. These are just some of the interesting ideas I came across when looking up what to talk about in this video, and many of them, aside from the basic premise of person with powers or consequences of said powers, explore completely different subjects and ideas. Just because you see several superhero films releasing every few months, that's no indicator that they will follow similar concepts, story patterns, or even rules. Bloodshot, Eternals, Aquaman, Project Power, these are all superhero movies set in a modern day setting, but all sit completely differently from each other in terms of plot, tone, characters, and appeal. If you ignore the connected universe aspect, the Eternals as characters have more in common with the old guard than they do with the other superhero movies in the Marvel lineup. But for everyone that does feel worn out by the sheer amount of superhero movies being released, I'd like to share a few of my favourites that speak to why I personally think this genre deserves to endure. Plus, giving them a watch couldn't hurt. Brightburn takes the classic Superman story we know and love, slaps some good old nightmare-inducing horror onto it, and leaves us to ponder just how fucked we'd be if this actually happened. V for Vendetta confronts the very nature of surveillance and freedom and asks if you can truly be free unless you fight for what you believe in. Kick-Ass is a fantastic satire of all the familiar tropes, while also presenting a unique and fun story in its own right. And Into the Spider-Verse reinvents the hero's journey and exemplifies what a superhero movie should try to do and the messages it should teach. And if we want to kick it really old school, there's an unbeatable classic no film has ever come close to topping. That's right, I'm talking about Sky High, baby. From these few examples alone, there's something in this genre for everyone, and though moving away from the archetypical hero's journey as the centre focus of every film has been rather slow going, I feel these changes can only future-proof these films more, as it will allow writers and directors to truly flex their creativity in making compelling narratives. Can the genre be considered oversaturated? Yes. But it's no longer the case at looking at new releases and saying they're the same old superhero movie, because a lot of superhero movies are no longer like your typical superhero movie. This is probably a gross overuse of the term superhero movie by this point, so permit me, dear viewer, this small tangent to look at another clear example that happened in the gaming industry. Open world video games have become an absolute staple in the market lately, with every company competing to showcase just how powerful their engines are or just whose design team has the largest IQ. At first, many downplayed the amazing potential of this new form of gaming as they felt it took away from the introspective nature of a tight-knit and well-structured linear format. But over the years, as more companies' interests begin to change, they more or less realised that a standard format could be made from all this. They brought about what everyone likes to call the Ubisoft open world formula. Make a large open world, make it look somewhat pretty, then spread your main missions and side missions so far apart players have to trek between them for hours so they spend more time playing. What's that? You want to spend even longer? Why didn't you say so? There's a million collectibles to find. Don't come back until you've liberated all those outposts now. I swear, you look at the market now and nearly every big game released is an open world or as close to one as possible, filled with nothing but these same collectible hunts and mediocre tasks. It was cute in Banjo and Kazooie, it's tedious by the time of Far Cry 4. Oversaturation was a real thing for the longest time, and most gamers were getting visually and mentally fatigued by them all. So all this time later, what do we have to show for it? Well, you can ride a robot cow now. As tired as some people have gotten from open world video games being these big collect my useless tats simulators across an admittingly beautiful looking world, they're never really going to go away. Instead, they've carved out their own little corner of the industry that has remained fairly consistent to this day. Will we see some massive shake-up to this format that makes open world games fun at all times? Maybe one day. For now, the constant small tweaks and innovations that are being made mean that slowly every new game that comes out can find its own niche and expand on what came before. And I think this could be what the superhero genre needs to go through. It can still remain a cornerstone of cinema in the way that most of the franchises are, it just needs to distinguish itself artistically rather than look like any myriad of smaller movies except with a much larger budget. Sometimes you just want one of these films to put that little bit of extra effort in to truly stand out from those around it. You look at some films or shows releasing today and you're like, damn, each one of these has such a distinct style and feeling to it, and then you look at some Marvel movies and you think, damn, I've seen VTubers with more depth than this. A lot of these films do use the same style of cinematography or colour palettes each time, so it sometimes can be really hard to distinguish which is which. But you know what? Baby steps at this point. Superhero movies for me are just comfort food sometimes. Do Marvel produce a lot of movies that come out on an almost regular basis? Yes, more often than not, you'll always find that one little gem tucked away somewhere that'll leave you feeling like, damn, that was actually pretty good, whether that be independent or corporate. I'm not expecting the genre to suddenly do a 180, but what I am saying is that the past few years haven't felt as cookie cutter, and there's been more variety than ever for a genre that is apparently copy and paste. I do think most of the films in this genre suffer from one massive issue, and it's one that only few people complain about, because to me, the biggest thing that sometimes takes me out of the moment for these films is the constantly escalating stakes. Since the start of the MCU, I don't think there's been a single moment where Marvel or their rivals DC have thought to themselves, wait, why does this one have to outdo the other in terms of spectacle? It is kind of getting to me. As much as I enjoy them, I could probably count how many have relatively low stakes on one hand. Even the independent superhero movies we've received during this time have been teasing with the idea of making things bigger and badder every time. Which leads me overall to my problem with the recent take that the superhero genre is mid, bland, or downright boring lately, when it's simply not true. Yes, there's definitely been some disappointing movies to release over the past couple of years, but picture it like this. You're an author who's been planning out a long anthology of books to cover your story. Having laid the foundations out over the course of 10 years, you've allowed other writers to come in with their own creative ideas and explore them freely so long as they build up towards the overarching narrative that you've created. Now imagine starting a new story following on after your already world-shaking conclusion. It's not going to be easy. I've seen so many stories of a hero coming to terms with their powers or having to fight a villain that they themselves created at times, that if you view it from a singular point of view, yes, they do all look similar. But when looked at from the scale of the story as we know it by now, these problems we seem to find in these films really don't seem as big as we once thought. They may not be mind-blowing, but at least they are consistent. There's been so many films of varying quality now that when I go into a screening of any new Marvel or DC or just a superhero movie in general, I don't set myself any outlandish standards on what to expect. I know I'm going to be entertained regardless, I'm just acutely aware that these films will never have the same standards as, say, Dune or The Godfather. I consider them a palate cleanser from other bigger and heavier hitting movies. When I've had a bad day, or just want to unwind after a long week, I know that I can always call up my mates, let them know what time the film starts, and go and have a good time. Whereas, I'd quietly contemplate The Last Duel or The Green Knight to myself. I can just relax and let whatever crackpot theories I've got for the future of the MCU come spilling out. It's all nonsense, but it is fun. It's one thing that I believe the superhero genre has changed about cinema. Not everything needs to be a masterclass 10 out of 10 Michelin star story of hardship, bravery and loyalty. Sometimes you just want to watch a bunch of bright CGI beat up a purple alien with a scrotum for a chin. Most of these films offer the chance to get away from the stress of everyday life and provide some decent entertainment, but they come out often enough that many can see the similarities between them all, and because of this we get dumb arguments on the internet about it. And that's not even getting into the films that have come out that have changed the way we think. The Batman, Multiverse of Madness, even Brightburn. It's movies like these where you can see the foundations being laid out for a much needed paradigm shift into more unique genres. There's murder mystery, supernatural, even straight up horror. These movies are branching out and trying something unique rather than reusing the same tired old format that worked for the past decade, with the occasional interesting idea sprinkled on top. Hell, Zack Snyder's Justice League spent an entire 4 hours telling the exact story the director wanted, so that it could turn around and say, hey, why don't we flesh out these characters so people actually find them compelling, and give them a spectacle that shows the sheer power behind some of these titans on the screen. And while a lot of people have their opinions on Snyder as a director, or their own fair criticism of the film itself, I respect the fact that it had the confidence to spend time on every member of the Justice League to give us full character arcs and a much more compelling version than what we got in the Joss Whedon version. Is it perfect? Far from it. The film I honestly felt that nailed its tone perfectly was The Batman. Okay, last time I'll gush about it, I swear, please go and see it, it's really good. If there was a movie that could be the start of the change most people want to see in the superhero genre, this could be it. Because unlike the vast majority of other superhero films, there are no cosmic stakes or grand action set pieces. It's a slow, methodical, and brutal movie about a detective hunting down a serial killer that tells the story it needs to tell and then leaves you with just enough breadcrumbs to put together the threads that have been left open. That's why I hope to God these types of movies will get the chance to fully realize just what they're capable of. Like your standard MCU or DC movie that now has galaxy-wide or even universal-scale problems, they lose that key audience investment that a small-scale story can bring. I'm not saying that they need to tone down the ever-expanding universe they've created, just that maybe it needs to be approached from a different perspective, because I don't feel like we're even close to reaching the peaks these stories are able to tell us. And I think it's only when we do get a chance to see some of those peaks that the superhero genre can start being looked at again in a more positive light. I feel like this is why the general consensus feel like these films aren't worthy of the praise they should be getting, and I hope that with a change in tone and a new direction, there can come a day when we no longer have to say, yeah, it was great for being a superhero movie, and instead just say, this is a great movie. In conclusion, yes, there are too many superhero movies. That just means we're spoilt for choice.